No one walks into a night expecting it to change the direction of their life, but sometimes life doesn't ask for permission. Lena Carter wasn't supposed to be at that event. The invitation had come from a coworker who insisted she needed one good night to forget everything she had been through. Standing at the edge of a glittering ballroom filled with laughter and polished elegance, Lena felt completely out of place. Her simple black dress suddenly felt too plain, her quiet nature too invisible. She was seconds away from leaving when he spoke. "Looks like we both don't belong here." His voice was calm, warm, unexpectedly familiar. She turned to find a man standing beside her, dressed sharply but carrying none of the arrogance she had expected from someone in a room like this. His name, he said, was Ethan. Just Ethan. What started as small talk turned into something deeper. They laughed over shared awkwardness, talked about dreams they had buried, and found comfort in each other's honesty. There was no pressure, no expectations, just two strangers allowing themselves to be real for once. They left the party early, walking through quiet city streets lit by soft golden lights. Time slowed. For a few hours nothing else existed, no past pain, no future worries. Just connection. When the night ended, neither of them asked for more. No numbers. No promises. Some moments they both understood were too perfect to survive reality. As Lena walked away that morning, she told herself it was over. But life has a way of circling back when you least expect it. In this story, it was only just beginning. Life didn't wait for Lena Carter to process what that night had meant. By Monday morning, she was already standing in front of a tall glass building, clutching her folder a little tighter than necessary. This was her fresh start. A new job, a new environment, a chance to rebuild herself after everything she had lost. She had promised herself one thing: no distractions, no emotional risks. Especially not ones that came with warm smiles and unforgettable conversations. The memory of Ethan lingered, but she pushed it aside as she stepped into the lobby. Today was about focus. Nothing else. After orientation, Lena was guided toward a conference room for her first departmental meeting. Her heart raced slightly, not from nerves alone, but from the weight of wanting everything to go right this time. She opened the door, and everything stopped. At the head of the table, dressed in a perfectly tailored suit, was a man she recognized instantly. Ethan. But he wasn't just Ethan anymore. He was Ethan Blake, the billionaire CEO of the company, her boss. The same man who had laughed with her under city lights just days ago now sat composed, powerful, completely in control. For a brief second, something flickered in his eyes, surprise, recognition, something deeper. But it vanished just as quickly. "Miss Carter, welcome," he said smoothly, his tone professional, distant, like they had never met before. Lena forced herself to nod, her mind spinning. She took her seat, her pulse echoing in her ears as the meeting continued like nothing had happened. But everything had happened. Every word they had shared. Every moment. Now trapped in silence between them. She lowered her gaze, telling herself one thing over and over. That night didn't exist here. It couldn't. Because in this world he wasn't just a stranger anymore. He was the one man she couldn't afford to remember. If pretending were a skill, Lena Carter was determined to master it. By the end of her first week, she had built a careful routine. Arrive early, stay focused, avoid unnecessary attention. Most importantly, avoid him. Ethan Blake. Saying his full name in her mind created a distance she desperately needed. It helped her separate the man from that night and the man who now ran the company with quiet authority. In meetings, she kept her eyes on her notes. In hallways, she stepped aside before he could pass. Every interaction was brief, respectful, and strictly professional. Exactly how it should be. But distance, she was beginning to realize, didn't erase awareness. Because Ethan noticed. He noticed how she never lingered after meetings, how she never spoke unless necessary, how she treated him no differently than anyone else. And somehow that made her stand out more than anyone in the room. It wasn't just that night anymore. It was her. Her quiet confidence. Her sincerity. The way she worked without seeking approval. So he did something he told himself was purely logical. He assigned her to projects that required direct communication with him. "Miss Carter, I'd like your input on this," he would say during meetings, his tone neutral, but his eyes searching for something unspoken. Lena responded professionally every time, never giving more than necessary. But beneath the surface tension grew. Not loud. Not obvious. Just there. Lingering in pauses. In brief glances. In the silence between sentences. One evening, as most of the office emptied, Lena found herself alone in the conference room finishing a report. She didn't notice him at first. Ethan stood by the door for a moment, watching quietly. "Still working?" he asked. She looked up, caught off guard. And just like that, the distance between them felt thinner than ever. The office was unusually quiet that evening, the kind of silence that made every small sound feel louder than it was. Lena Carter glanced up from her laptop as Ethan stepped fully into the conference room. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The air felt different, less formal, less guarded. "Deadlines don't scare you, do they?" he said lightly, nodding toward her screen. Lena exhaled softly. "I could say the same about you." A faint smile touched his lips, small but real. It was the first time since that morning meeting that he didn't feel like a distant figure behind a title. He walked over, setting a file on the table before pulling out a chair across from her. Not at the head. Not in control. Just across. "Mind if I join you?" he asked. Lena hesitated for half a second, then shook her head. "It's your company." Ethan chuckled quietly. "Tonight, I'd rather it just be a workspace." That answer lingered between them. They worked in silence at first, exchanging occasional comments about the project. But slowly, like the night they first met, the conversation shifted. Less about work. More about everything else. "You're different here," Lena said before she could stop herself. Ethan didn't seem surprised. "I have to be." She studied him carefully. "Do you ever get tired of it?" For a moment he didn't answer. Then he leaned back slightly, his expression softer than she had ever seen it. "All the time." It wasn't a grand confession, but it was honest. And somehow that mattered more. The room felt smaller after that, not because of space but because of understanding. Lena closed her laptop, the weight of the moment settling in. "You don't always have to carry it alone," she said quietly. Ethan looked at her, really looked this time, not as an employee, not as a memory, but as someone who saw him clearly. Something shifted. He stood slowly, then hesitated, like he was crossing an invisible line. When he stepped closer, Lena didn't move away. The hug was gentle, almost uncertain at first. But as seconds passed, it became something steady, grounding. No confusion. No pressure. Just comfort. And in that quiet room, for the first time since reality interrupted their night, neither of them felt like they had to pretend anymore. By the following week, the atmosphere in the office had changed. It started subtly, whispers that quieted when Lena Carter walked past, glances that lingered a little too long, conversations that abruptly shifted when she entered the room. At first, she tried to ignore it, convincing herself it was nothing. But nothing doesn't follow you into elevators. Nothing doesn't make people look at you like they've already decided who you are. She's always in his meetings now. "I heard she got assigned directly by him." The words were never said to her face, but they didn't need to be. Lena felt them. Each one building a wall around her. She sat at her desk, staring at her screen, but the numbers blurred. She had worked too hard to be here, to earn her place honestly. The last thing she wanted was to be reduced to assumptions tied to someone else's name. Especially his. Across the floor, behind glass walls, Ethan Blake noticed the shift too. He noticed how Lena no longer spoke unless necessary. How she avoided not just him, but everyone. The warmth she carried so naturally had been replaced with distance. And it didn't sit right with him. Not because of the rumors. But because of what they were doing to her. Later that day he called her into his office. Lena walked in composed, her expression carefully neutral. "You wanted to see me, sir?" "Sir." The word created a space between them that hadn't been there before. Ethan exhaled slowly. "Lena, we need to talk." "If this is about work, I've already submitted the report," she replied quickly, her tone polite but guarded. "It's not about the report." Silence settled. She finally met his gaze. "Then what is it about?" Ethan hesitated, something he rarely did. "It's about what's being said, and how it's affecting you." Lena straightened slightly, her voice calm but firm. "I can handle myself." "I know you can," he said. "But you shouldn't have to." For a moment her composure wavered. Not because she was weak, but because he had noticed, and that made it harder. "I came here to work," she said quietly. "Not to be talked about." Ethan stepped closer, his voice softer now. "And you've earned that. More than anyone here." But Lena shook her head gently. "Then let me prove it on my own." The distance returned in that moment, not loud, not dramatic. Just built brick by brick. And this time, Lena was the one placing the walls. Distance was supposed to make things easier. That's what Lena Carter told herself as the days passed. She kept her head down, focused on her work, and avoided anything that could blur the lines she had worked so hard to redraw. But distance, she was learning, didn't quiet everything. Some things only grew louder in silence. Ethan Blake had reached his limit. Watching her pull away, watching her pretend that what they had shared meant nothing, felt worse than the rumors, worse than any risk to his reputation. Because this wasn't about power or position anymore. It was about her. That evening, as the office emptied once again, he found her. Lena. His voice stopped her just as she reached the elevator. She turned slowly, her expression composed, but her eyes guarded. We need to talk, he said. She hesitated. We already did. Not like this. Something in his tone made her stay. They moved to a quieter corner of the building, away from curious eyes, away from everything that made things complicated. For a moment, neither spoke. Then Ethan exhaled, running a hand through his hair, a rare crack in his usual control. I can't keep pretending, he said. Lena's heart tightened, but she kept her voice steady. Pretending what? That you're just another employee. His gaze held hers, unwavering now. That night didn't matter. That you don't matter. Silence. Heavy. Honest. Lena looked away briefly, gathering herself. Ethan. This isn't simple. I know, he said quickly. But what I feel isn't complicated. Her eyes met his again, searching, uncertain. I haven't stopped thinking about you, he continued. Not because of that night, but because of who you are. The way you see people. The way you stay true to yourself even when it's hard. Her defenses trembled. I don't say things I don't mean, Lena, he added softly. And I mean this. For a moment she said nothing. Because the truth was, she felt it too. And that was the problem. You're my boss, she finally said, her voice quieter now. Your world, it's not mine. Then I'll meet you in yours. The words landed gently, but deeply. Lena's breath caught, the weight of everything pressing in at once. Fear. Hope. Uncertainty. She stepped closer before she could overthink it. The hug wasn't hesitant this time. It was needed. Grounding. A silent admission of everything neither of them could fully say out loud. But even in that moment of closeness, Lena knew one thing remained unchanged. Wanting something didn't mean it would work. And the choice ahead of her would not be easy. Some decisions don't come from a lack of feeling. They come from having too much of it. Lena Carter sat at her desk early the next morning, long before the office filled with its usual noise. The resignation letter on her screen had been written, deleted, and rewritten more times than she could count. Her heart told her to stay. But her principles told her otherwise. She stared at the final line for a long moment before taking a steady breath and hitting print. The sound of the machine echoed louder than it should have. As the day unfolded, everything felt sharper. Every conversation, every passing glance, every second that brought her closer to what she had already decided. By noon, she stood outside Ethan Blake's office. For a brief moment, doubt crept in. But she pushed it down and knocked. Come in. His voice was calm, unaware. Lena stepped inside, closing the door behind her. Ethan looked up from his desk, and the moment their eyes met, something in his expression shifted. He could read it before she even spoke. What is it? He asked, standing slowly. She placed the envelope on his desk. I'm resigning. The words were steady, but not easy. Silence filled the room as Ethan looked down at the letter, then back at her. No, he said quietly. Lena swallowed. This is the right decision. For who? He challenged, stepping closer. Because it's not right for me. This isn't about you, she replied, her voice soft but firm. It's about me keeping my name, my work, mine. You already have that, he said. No one here defines you. But they're trying to, she answered. And staying will only make it worse. Ethan's jaw tightened, not in anger, but in frustration at a situation he couldn't control. I meant what I said, he added, his voice lowering. I'm not giving up on this. Lena's expression softened just slightly. I'm not asking you to, she said. I'm asking you to respect this. That was the hardest part. Because he did respect her. More than anyone, Ethan looked at her for a long moment, the weight of everything unspoken passing between them. Finally he nodded once. Slowly. I won't stop you, he said. But I won't disappear either. Lena felt her chest tighten at those words. Goodbye, Ethan, she whispered. But as she turned to leave, both of them knew. This wasn't an ending. It was a test of whether what they felt could survive without titles, without proximity, without certainty. Walking away had been harder than Lena Carter expected. The first few days after leaving the company felt unfamiliar, quiet in a different way. There were no structured meetings, no glass offices, no lingering whispers. Just space. Space to breathe. Space to think. And yet, his absence was the loudest thing in it. Lena threw herself into rebuilding. She applied for new opportunities, attended interviews, and slowly began shaping a path that belonged entirely to her. No shadows. No assumptions. Just her name and her work. Still, there were moments, unexpected ones, when her mind drifted back to him. The way he listened. The way he saw her. The way he didn't try to control her, even when he had every reason to. That was what made it harder to forget. One afternoon, as she stepped out of a small cafe after an interview, she saw a familiar figure standing across the street. Ethan. Not in a suit that demanded attention. Not surrounded by assistants or expectations. Ethan. For a second she wondered if she was imagining him. But then he smiled, that same quiet, sincere smile she remembered from the very beginning, and walked toward her. "I was hoping I'd find you here," he said. Lena crossed her arms lightly, not out of coldness but to steady herself. "You've been looking for me?" "Not like before," he replied. "No schedules. No authority. Just me showing up." She studied him carefully. "Why?" "Because I told you I wouldn't disappear." There was no pressure in his voice. No demand. Just truth. They walked together without a clear destination, talking the way they had that first night. Easily, naturally. Ethan didn't ask about her decisions or try to change them. Instead he listened. Really listened. When she spoke about her plans, her uncertainty, her hopes, he supported her, not as someone above her, but beside her. At one point she stopped walking, turning to face him fully. "You're different," she said. Ethan tilted his head slightly. "Or maybe this is who I always was, without everything else in the way." That answer stayed with her. For the first time, Lena saw it clearly. He wasn't trying to bring her back into his world. He was stepping into hers. And slowly, carefully she let him. When he reached for her, the hug they shared felt lighter than before, less weighed down by conflict, more filled with quiet understanding. This wasn't about power anymore. It was about choice. And for the first time, Lena realized. She was no longer afraid of choosing him. Lena Carter had worked too hard to rebuild her life to let it be shaken again. Weeks after leaving the company, things were finally beginning to fall into place. She had secured a promising role with a smaller firm, one where her work spoke louder than assumptions. For the first time in a long while she felt steady. Until everything threatened to unravel. It started with a post online. A former employee, someone bitter, someone watching from the outside, shared a distorted version of Lena's time at Ethan Blake's company. The story spread quickly, twisting her hard work into something it wasn't. According to them, Lena had only risen because of connections, because of favoritism. Because of him. By morning, messages flooded her inbox, some curious, others accusing. The fragile peace she had built began to crack under the weight of public judgment. Lena sat in her apartment, staring at her phone, her chest tight. She had walked away to protect her name. And still, it followed her. Before she could decide what to do, another notification appeared. A statement. From Ethan Blake. She opened it with trembling hands. He didn't hide behind legal teams or vague responses. Instead, he spoke clearly, firmly, about Lena's professionalism, her integrity, and the fact that her resignation had been entirely her choice. He made it known that any implication otherwise was false. But more than that, he stood beside her. Publicly. Completely. The impact was immediate. The narrative began to shift. People listened, not just because of who he was, but because of how certain he sounded. Because he wasn't protecting himself. He was protecting her. Later that day, Lena found him waiting outside her building. "You didn't have to do that," she said as she approached, though her voice carried more emotion than protest. "Yes, I did," Ethan replied simply. "You could have stayed out of it. Protected your image." He shook his head. "What's the point of any of that if I don't stand for what's right?" Lena held his gaze, searching, and finding nothing but sincerity. "You didn't stand above me," she said quietly. "I never wanted to," he answered. "I wanted to stand with you." The words settled into something real. Something lasting. Lena stepped closer, the weight she had been carrying finally easing. This time when she hugged him, there was no hesitation. No doubt. Because in that moment she understood something clearly. Love wasn't about who had more. It was about who stayed when things became difficult. And Ethan had chosen to stay. Now, it was her turn to choose him. Some stories don't begin with a plan, they begin with a choice. Lena Carter had learned that the hard way. From a night she thought would never matter, to a world where power and expectation tried to define her, She had discovered something that no title, no whisper, and no challenge could take away: the power of choosing for herself. Months had passed since the office rumors, the resignations, and the public misunderstandings. Lena now had a role that reflected her talent, her independence, and her vision. She walked confidently into every room knowing her name, her effort, and her integrity carried the weight they deserved. And beside her, quietly, steadfastly, was Ethan Blake. Not her boss. Not the billionaire everyone feared. Just Ethan. The man who had laughed with her on city streets, who had hugged her when words weren't enough, who had stayed through the rumors, the doubts, and the distance. They found themselves back where it all began, an ordinary city park, golden lights spilling over quiet streets. They didn't speak immediately. They didn't need to. Every glance, every small smile, was a conversation in itself. "I never thought one night could change everything," Lena said softly. Ethan reached for her hand, giving it a gentle squeeze. "Neither did I. But I'm glad it did." She laughed, a sound unburdened, free. "We had a lot to figure out." "And we did," he agreed. "We chose each other anyway." They shared a long hug, the kind that carries months of unsaid words, challenges faced and promises kept. No power, no titles, just two hearts choosing to be together. For Lena, for Ethan, forever didn't come from the world around them. It came from the moments they chose to stay, to trust, and to love. And in that quiet embrace they knew, this time it wasn't fleeting. This time it was forever.